Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MRC's Fellowship Transition. Welcome to the MRC's Fellowships Transition to the New Funding Service webinar. I'm Amy Waite, the Programme Manager for Peer Review, and this session will consist of a presentation which will give an overview and hints and tips on using the new funding service. There will also be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Please use the question and answer functionality to do this, and please do not put questions in the chat, as these may be missed and not answered. Questions may be answered with a written response during or after the webinar or live during the question and answer session, where a panel of MRC staff will be on hand to take your questions. This session will also be recorded and made available and the Q&A published following the session. So fellowship opportunities currently open on the funding service are the pre-doc and post-doc clinical research training fellowships, Clinician Scientist Fellowship, Career Development Award, and Senior Non-Clinical Fellowship. Please note that there are two different types of clinical research training fellowships. A pre-doctoral scheme, which provides funding to healthcare professionals to undertake a PhD or similar, and a postdoctoral scheme for healthcare professionals with a PhD needing to reacquire research skills. Please make sure if you're applying to either scheme that you have chosen the correct opportunity. All MRC fellowship applications going forward will need to be submitted via the new funding service. I would like to stress that there are no MRC fellowship opportunities open using the Joint Electronic Submission System, or JES. For this round, all the fellowship opportunities will close on the 13th of September 2023 at 4 p.m. So please ensure you submit your application by the deadline. We cannot accept any applications after this date. I would like to stress there is absolutely no flexibility on this. Timelines for shortlisting and interviews for both clinical and non-clinical fellowships are stated on the slide. And the next round for the Clinical Research Training Fellowship and Clinician Scientist Fellowship applications will open in October 2023 and they will close in January 2024. The next round for the Career Development Award and Senior Non-Clinical Fellowships will open in February 2024 and close in April 2024. And the Senior Clinical Fellowships only opens once a year for applications, and the next round will follow the usual schedule, which will open in February 2024 on the new funding service. So for this slide, it shows a variety of fellowship opportunities MRC has to offer, and I'm going to hand over to Sam now to talk you through these. So I'll hand over to Sam.
Right, so the focus of this session obviously is on the transition to the funding service, but I just wanted to use one slide just to give a quick overview of the fellowship opportunities the MRC offers. So MRC fellowships are designed to support researchers and clinicians at key transition points in their careers, and the schemes welcome applications from across all areas of MRC remit to improve human health. So this can range from basic studies with relevance to mechanisms to disease to translational and developmental clinical research. There are several different types of MRC fellowship, and each are tailored to specific career stages. So we have our pre-doctoral clinical research training fellowships and the postdoctoral clinical research traineeships, which provide funding for registered healthcare professionals to undertake a PhD for the pre-doctoral scheme or to reacquire those research skills. We have the Career Development Award and the Clinician Scientist Fellowship, which provide funding to non-clinical and clinically qualified researchers, respectively, to establish themselves as independent investigators. And then we have our senior fellowship schemes, which provide funding to researchers who have a track record of leading their own independent research to become internationally recognised leaders in their fields. Full information on all these opportunities are available on our web pages, and it's really important as applicants to carefully consider what scheme is right for you and for your career stage and for your future career ambitions. And finally, just to quickly highlight, since the last call for applications, there has been a change to the funding rules for the pre-doctoral clinical research training fellowship. So please carefully look through that opportunity webpage if you are intending to apply to the scheme. Essentially, funding is provided for your salary appropriate to your level of training, for tuition fees at the home student rate, and up to £25,000 each year to cover consumables, equipment and travel. You may be able to request extra funding costs for some exceptions, but it's very important applicants are mindful of the scope and aims of the fellowship and make sure that their proposed project demonstrates an appropriate level of ambition for a training fellowship. That's everything from me. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Sam. I'll move on to my next slide. So the funding service, or TFS, as you will hear the new funding service being referred to throughout this presentation, has been built to offer internal and external users an easier, simpler and better experience. So the new UKRI funding service will replace UKRI's existing systems, including the Joint Electronic Submission or JES system, and ultimately the new service will support all UKRI funding opportunities of every type and from any UKRI organisation. These changes will make it easier for researchers and innovators to collaborate, obtain guidance, and submit applications in a joined-up way. So what will remain the same in the new service? There will be a number of things that will remain the same, including the expectations of what the Medical Research Council will fund. So that means we will continue to fund the highest quality research. We will also continue to have the same funding opportunities and fellowship types. The aims, budget, project scale, and duration will remain the same. The number of rounds of an opportunity and general timings will continue. And peer review and panel meetings will follow the same processes and funding decisions will be made in the same way. So what is different in the new service? So this slide shows a quick overview of the key differences for fellowship applicants. So this includes where you can seek help. As you can see, it's now the funding service support. The case of support is replaced by the vision and approach document, where there will also be a separate question on career progression. Applicants will no longer submit CVs, but will complete a resume for research and innovation, and cover letters are no longer used, and sensitive information will need to be emailed to the help desk. Applications will no longer be returned for amendment, and if the mistake provides an unfair advantage or contains errors that make the application difficult to assess, we will withdraw the application. Otherwise, it will go through to peer review as submitted. And finally, fellowships still require a supervisor or a sponsor, but this will now be listed as a professional enabling staff. So that's a quick overview, and I will go into more detail during the presentation. So what will the new funding service look like? You can search for opportunities in the funding finder, and for more information on how to use this, there is a UKRI video available, which I can share following the presentation. Once you click onto the opportunity you're interested in, it will bring you to a page like this, where you can see the timeline and all the important information that goes with it. The button to start an application is at the top of the funding find opportunity page. You must, however, read through the opportunity before applying to ensure it is the right opportunity for you, and you can provide all the information required for a competitive application. Scrolling down the page, there is also all the information you need on who can apply for any eligibility questions and how to apply. The how to apply section has all of the guidance which can be found within the application form, including word counts for each section. So what's changing in the funding service for applying? Guidance and questions are consistent, concise, in one place, and reflect the assessment criteria. As soon as an application is created, your research office will have visibility of it. The new service will only ask for what we need once and when we need it. You'll see there are fewer documents to upload, and this will continue to decrease as we use the service more. The service has a much more accessible and intuitive interface, and there are automated checks before submission, for example, word count, which make it easier to use. We are also introducing a new set of common grant roles, which reduces the role types from 35 to 12. Everyone previously eligible for funding will continue to be so, but these roles offer greater consistency across UKRI. In all TFS applications, there is a section to list the members of the core team using these roles. The role for fellow remains the same. There is more information on the roles on the UKRI website, including tips on equivalent role types. Some roles don't apply for fellowships, so won't appear for you to select, like project lead, project co-lead, and doctoral students. We are asking you to use the professional enabling staff role for fellowship supervisors or sponsors. Here you can see the application form. It has guidance for each section, and it is very self-contained. Only the fellowship applicant can edit these fields. Co-editing is being developed and will be available in the future. You need to work through the sections and enter your application information in text boxes for all sections. Any sections that do not apply to your application, simply enter NA in the text box and move to the next section. Some sections allow you to upload a PDF only. For example, the vision and approach, the head of department statements will need to be combined into one PDF, project partner letters of support all combined into one PDF, and this information is in the application form. You then need to mark the section of the application as complete when you are ready. Some tips for using the new funding service. You will need to register, and you can create an account by clicking the link in the funding finder. You'll need to complete your EDI information, equality, diversity and inclusion information, and the application will not be sent to your research office unless this is completed. Please note, if you prefer, you can put prefer not to say in response to the EDI questions. Applications must be created by the fellowship applicant rather than a supervisor or research office staff. And research officers can only currently view the application, not edit. In the funding service, research officers with an administrator account can see when an application is first created and view all applications being prepared at their organisation. They can also return an application to an applicant for further editing. Research officers authorise and submit the application to UKRI. Please ensure you speak with your research office to understand any internal deadlines when starting an application. You can also contact the help desk by phone or email. You can see the contact section for the funding finder for who your research office contact is, although you should follow up internally first. And you can please feel free to provide any feedback on anything that isn't working so we can continue to improve the service. Some other things to be prepared for. We are using the new core application questions and criteria. All of the application questions are published on the funding opportunity page. For this opportunity, you provide the vision and approach information as an attachment, similar to the current case for support. We're asking for resume for research and innovation information rather than traditional CVs, and more information can be found on the website. Going forward, you will not be able to nominate reviewers, and applications can't be returned or amended after submission. Applications which are not suitable will now be rejected. Here you can see an overview of the core areas for assessment. We are using the UKRI core questions with some additional context or guidance for the MRC research, for example. For vision, we may ask you to identify potential improvements in human or population health, whether through contributing to relieving disease or disability burden, improving quality of life, or providing benefit to the health service or health-related industry. For approach, we may ask you to specify population groups in relation to their diversity characteristics and the proposed analysis following the MRC embedding diversity in research design policy, or we may ask you for reproducibility and statistical design. These are the core sections that all applicants will need to complete. All applicants will also need to complete basic project details, such as a title, start date, and the primary MRC research area. A summary of the project is also required that will be sent to potential reviewers and will be published if your application is successful. For the vision and approach question, you will be asked to upload a PDF. The permitted length of this document depends on the type of fellowship you are applying for. There are additional optional pages for visual project plan and reproducibility information. For example, a career development award, the vision approach is 6 pages, plus 2 optional pages, which means you could have up to 8 pages. If you do not want to provide the recommended optional information, so that's the visual project plan and reproducibility information, or it is not relevant to your application, then you must limit the length of your document accordingly and not use optional pages for anything other than the specified purpose. If you go over the page length or add additional information to your application, it will be rejected. The file size must be no more than 8 megabytes and use 11-point font margins of 2 centimeters. And all of this information is in the application and online. I would also like to highlight our new MRC policy on embedding diversity in research design. Diversity should be considered in the design of all research applications submitting to closing dates after the 1st of September 2023. That means you must consider this in your fellowships applications. Applicants should consider the characteristics of the population groups or subgroups who could benefit from the research being proposed and include these groups in your application. Applicants should describe the approach that they have taken to address diversity and promoting inclusion of these groups and explain and justify why this approach has been taken. MRC will, as normal, fund well-designed applications where the costs are appropriately justified. You can see here this policy will be rolled out in the first application deadlines in September within the approach question. First fellowship panels will take this into account with the new guidance from February 2024, and it is anticipated that a further integration into TFS will happen from 2024 onwards. If you have any specific questions about this policy, you can also see the team's email on this slide. Resume for research and innovation is used to assess capability of the applicant to deliver the project. It replaces all CVs. You will have 1,000 words to highlight your most relevant skills and experience. You can include wider teams if applicable. 500 words for additions, so that's optional other factors for the assessors to consider, such as career breaks, COVID-19 impacts. And there's more guidance and information on the UKRI website on how to complete a resume for research and innovation. And I will share that following the presentation. Depending on your project, you may also need to answer these application questions about your career development and how you'll be supported through the fellowship. For example, career progression, head of department statements, supervisor or sponsors or mentors. Dependent on your project, you may also need to answer these application questions. I won't read through them all, but you can see there's a lot of different things depending on your project. There are also a number of documents that are no longer required. If we don't ask for it in the funding service, you do not need to provide it in the application. So cover letters are no longer needed. Instead, you can answer the related applications questions for any resubmissions, or you can submit any sensitive information via the help desk. As discussed, CVs and publication lists are not needed and are replaced by the resume for research and innovation. For collaboration with industry, the Industry Collaboration Framework or ICF form is not needed. Instead, it is incorporated into the application. And most letters of support are no longer required except head of department and project partners. And finally, the MRC unit course funding statement, equipment quotes and business case are no longer required. So what's next? If you're invited to interview, we will contact you with the arrangements and you will be able to see your reviews before the interview. Funding opportunities will continue to evolve as we continue to develop and improve the new funding service. Check the funding finder for updates if you're interested in the next round before starting an application. Some of the possible changes that are coming up are that the templates we are asking you to attach for round one may be replaced by structured questions, for example, animals, project partners. The vision and approach question may become a digital response with embedded images, which will replace the PDF attachment. We may also update page lengths or word counts for questions as we continue to streamline across UKRI. UKRI have published resources to help users as they begin to use the new service, and there are a number of videos available, which I'll share following the presentation, and that are available online. So how can you get involved or stay up to date? You can sign up for the Simpler and Better newsletter for regular updates on the new funding service, events and resources. There are regular research office webinars, and you can see links here. You can sign up for user research as well, or you can visit our website for more information. And finally, there will be help available should you need it. Your host organisation will be able to provide advice and guidance to assist you with the creation and completion of your application. They will be able to guide you through any internal deadlines they have put in place, allowing them sufficient time to complete a review of your application before completing the final submission through the funding service. The UKRI Funding Service Help Desk email number displayed for any technical questions and basic questions about how to apply. For more complex questions, you can consider contacting the MRC Training and Careers team via the email on the slide, where they can provide guidance on remit, career stage, advice and eligibility. You can also see listed some helpful things to include in your email, for example, which scheme you're applying to, CVs and list of publications, a one-page project outline, and a description of how you meet the skills and experience required for the relevant scheme. So that kind of concludes the presentation part of the webinar. So thank you everyone for listening. So I will now hand over to the MRC panel members, and I'm going to ask them all to turn on their cameras, and so we can introduce everybody. I'm just going to stop sharing here. Sarah, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name's Sarah Collins. I'm the Head of Funding Operations at the MRC, and I'm here to answer your questions about the new funding service and how to use it.
David?
Good afternoon everyone, I'm David Pan, I'm Head of Programme for Training and Careers.
Sarah Reynolds?
Hi everyone, I'm the Research Funding Policy Manager for MRC. And my team are usually the first point of contact for most applicants applying to MRC beyond the fellowships team. So hopefully it can be helpful in answering your questions today.
Amy Prosser?
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Prosser. I'm an operations manager here at MRC, and I work alongside Sarah Reynolds on our research funding policy delivery team.
Ivan?
Hello everyone, I'm Ivan Pavlov. I'm Head of Preclinical Good Research Practice Policy.
Thank you. Charles?
Hi everyone, I'm Charles Evans. I'm a Programme Manager in the Training and Careers team, and I mostly look after the CRTF scheme and the CDA scheme and the SNCF scheme as well.
And finally, Sam, who also spoke during the presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'm Sam or Samantha Moore. I am also a Programme Manager in the Training Careers team, and I primarily look after the Clinician Scientist Fellowship and the Senior Clinical Fellowship schemes.
Thank you. And Zoe Walker is going to very kindly ask the questions for us today. So would you like to begin, Zoe?
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. The first question that we have, and it's been upvoted, is if we are ending our first year of PhD, are we still eligible to apply if we have 24 months remaining at the time of submission? So Charles, are you happy to answer that one, please?
I can answer that question, yes. I'm afraid if you've got 24 months left at the point of submission, then actually that's too late really to be applying for the CRTF scheme, because given the timeline that it runs on to make a decision won't be made until the point where you have maybe 15 or 18 months left of your PhD work, and the minimum length of time that we'll fund on the CRTF is a 24-month project. So that would be too late, I'm afraid, to apply.
Great, thank you, Charles. So the next question I have is, can we put figures in the main part of the application or only in the additional page? Sarah Collins, could you answer that one, please?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. The first thing to be aware of when using the new funding service is that any of the questions that require you to complete an answer in a text box, these are currently text-only responses, so it isn't possible to put any images into any of the text boxes. However, if we're asking you to upload a document, then you are free to put images into that document, however many images that you wish to, and throughout the document within the page limits that we have given you for that document. So obviously if you choose to include images, they may take up quite a lot of space in your vision and approach attachment, but it's completely your decision how many images you wish to use and where you wish to place them in that document.
Thanks, Sarah. I think I've got another one for you here. So the application guidelines state that you can add more reproducibility information, including statistical analysis, in the extra page. But does this mean all statistical analyses should be described here, or only those that relate to reproducibility?
So this is again referring to the document we're asking you to upload, which is the vision and approach document, which has varying lengths according to the type of fellowship that you're asking for. You can include statistical information, other methodological information within the main page limit of your vision and approach document, however you wish to do that to explain your approach to the research. There is an extra page that you can go on into, should you wish to to expand further on your statistical design, and in particular to address issues of reproducibility. So that extra page can only be used for that type of information, but it is not that all of the information you wish to give us about methodology and experimental design needs to be within that one page.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question is, what is the expected balance of each question in the vision and approach? There was a guide for the former case for support, but we do not see anything in the new format.
I can make a start there, and maybe Sam or Charles will want to chip in. So we did consider whether to continue the guidance around, how to balance your answer in this document, bringing over the similar statement from the case for support guidance. But we do have a new format here. We have some new criteria that we're introducing. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to use that document how you feel is most appropriate. We didn't think it was necessary at this time to give you that kind of steer in terms of how to break down the document, because we haven't seen how you want to use it yet and how you can use it most effectively. So really it's over to you for that document. If you do want a guide, you can refer back to that previous information from how the fellowship scheme has run in the past, but we're not necessarily recommending that as the best way to approach this new document. Sam or Charles, did you want to chip in?
Yeah, agree with everything you've said there, Sarah. So it's a very different system, and obviously we lay out within the funding finder advert what we expect in terms of, for the vision and for the approach, and also within the funding opportunity, when you're filling it in the funding service, it actually tells you what the assessors are going to be looking for in those answers as well. So you're basically wanting to hit those points when the assessors are looking at your response, you'll know what they're looking for, and therefore you can provide the information in order to make it really clear what your vision is going to be and how you're going to address the questions that you've proposed. And then obviously, I think the case for support before, we used to have the weighting was a little bit, there was some about the research environment and to do with your career progression. That's actually now a separate section, a separate text box within the funding service application form. It's a section on career progression. So you've got this separate section to actually answer a question about why the work proposed, the environment it's going to be conducted in, and the support provided by your host organisation is actually the right way to develop your career.
Thank you both for that one. This next one is, I am an allied health professional, a sonographer registered with ARDMS and working privately in the UK. Would I be eligible for a fellowship? Sam or Charles, would you take that one, please?
I think for that one, we would ask you to basically email into the fellows inbox to get in touch with us, so we could just find out a little bit more about your registration. However, for the clinical fellowships, allied health professionals are eligible, but it's quite difficult to comment on sort of individual people's circumstances without sort of CVs and things like that, and having that sort of offline discussion. So I think that's best to be answered by dropping us an email at fellows@mrc.ukri.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. The next question is, for the CDA, guidance on career stage from UKRI skills and experience needed to win support webpage says experience matching transition to independence includes typically at least one postdoctoral appointment. Are proposals from applications with only one postdoctoral appointment accepted or encouraged? Would such a candidate be disadvantaged? Is the length of postdoctoral work considered important?
Cool, thanks, Zoe. Yeah, I'll answer that one. So I think typically with these transition to independent schemes, so that the kind of at least one postdoctoral appointment is a kind of useful rule of thumb. It's not restrictive, so actually you could apply for the CDA and have done no postdoc appointments at all, or you could apply for it and have done 5 or 6 years of postdoc, for example. what we're really looking for, and what the reviewers will be looking for, is for you to make a case for why now is the right time for you to take on this fellowship. You know, give examples of sort of how you are at the point where you have the right amount of experience and expertise to, you know, lead a piece of research, become an independent researcher, have a, you know, small team of your own for the first time, for example. And if you can make that case, and if you can make a compelling case, then that's what our panelists are looking for. They're not, you know, sort of sat there with a sort of little clipboard going, oh, I can't tick this box because they've not done, you know, 3 years of postdoc or whatever. That's not how they review these things. So it really is up to an applicant to make that case for why now is the right time. And we're not too prescriptive on how much time you've spent being a postdoc. So I think that hopefully that covers all of that question.
Great, thank you, Charles. The next question is a partner a collaborator in normal working?
I start off with that one. So yes, a project partner is a collaborator, but they're sort of a sort of next level up from the average collaborator that you may be working with in your fellowship. So a project partner should be bringing something defined to your fellowship. They should be offering you something either in cash terms or in kind terms to help your project be achievable. So that's why you need to define them as a project partner, so that we can capture their details and also the contributions that they're bringing. Other types of collaborators, which may be more routine, more of an academic collaboration where you're just sharing knowledge or data, you know, not so established and formalized, then they don't need to be listed as project partners, but it would be good for you to talk about those collaborations in your vision and approach documents so that it's clear who you're working with and how big your network might be. If anyone else wants to add anything to that from a fellowships point, then please do.
No, I think that's pretty much covered most of it. I think maybe you did say it, Sarah, but basically for the project partners, it would be they would be offering that sort of specific contribution to your fellowship, and they wouldn't be located at the research organisation that you're going to be hosted at. I think that's correct, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah. Yes. And you can sort of include information, you know, within the vision and approach, as people used to within the case for support. You know, if you want to say, you know, I'm going to do this and it's going to be supported by so and so, you know, to make it that narrative document.
Can I just add in the only other additional point on that is industrial collaborators that may be involved in there, where you may need to set out an industrial collaboration framework document, which covers how the IP will be managed, and as well as the financial contributions to the project. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. The answers to the previous question might lead into this question, which is, what is the difference between a project partner and a second centre who can then request additional funding for travel, accommodations and training, etc.?
So, I mean, a project partner should be providing a specific contribution to the project. They're not expected to be requesting any financial remuneration from the project itself, whereas for a second centre, what a second centre is providing is that unique training opportunity. You know, are you going to be going to that centre? Are you going to be undertaking research and training at that place? And as such, you can request costs to cover the research and training that you're going to undertake at that second centre.
Thanks there, Sam. The next question: is a sponsor a referee in normal wording, who usually provide a letter of recommendation, again in normal wording, or is this a person who provides practical, technical advice? And how is this person different from a partner?
Okay, so the sponsor is essentially the person. is the person who is going to support you during sort of the course of your fellowship. So they're not going to supervise the work, but they're basically sort of underwriting the fact that the research and science that you're going to do is going to be of sort of a high quality. So I guess in a way they might be seen as a bit of like a referee, but they are supposed to sort of be providing, you know, with that support as well. And what was the other part of that question, Zoe?
Is this a person who provides practical technical advice, and how are they different from a partner, which I think is mostly answered?
Yeah, so the sponsor should have that expertise within your scientific area. So they are actually, you know, they're acting as that guarantor for the quality of the research, and they're actually sort of a guarantor as well for you as the quality of the applicant as well. Whereas the project partner, as sort of we mentioned, is someone who is a collaborator who's offering something specific to the project. So, but they're not sponsoring you. They're not going to be there as basically a supporter for the application. Thanks.
And I mean, typically they would be a senior member of the department that you're applying from as well, just to be that difference, as opposed to a collaborator who would be external.
Okay, thank you both. So the next question it has been upvoted. So there is a references section in the CSS form. Can this be used to list references used in multiple different sections of the form, i.e. not just the vision and approach document, but also the narrative, CV, etc., in brackets, to help detail publication record?
I'll take that one. Yes, the references section can be used to refer to publications or any other types of outputs or resources that relate to any other sections of the application. You may wish to explain how they were related to make it easier for the assessors. You are able to include your selected publications within the applicant capability to deliver a section, but if you want to add more publications within the references section, that's okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question has been upvoted again. For the R4RI, should I include a list of publications? I was told for the BBSRC R4RI that I could only mention 2 or 3 key publications.
There's no absolute rules there on the numbers of publications. You have a limited number of words in order to explain your capability to do the fellowship and to give us your track record and your skills and experience. So our advice is to be selective. We would prefer to see a wider response in terms of your broadest picture of your skills, experience, capabilities, rather than a list of every publication that you can draw together. But if you can, give us some really key pertinent publications in that document, in that section of the application, then that's fine. And we don't have any cap on the number, but clearly you need to sort of manage the space however you think best that's available to you.
Yeah, so just to comment on that, you're really using that statement to provide that evidence that you have the ability and potential to actually carry out the research that you're proposing. That's what you're using that for. And equally, if you are applying for a fellowship where you're asking for staff members on there, we need to know that the panel need to be reassured that you are able to supervise these staff members. So, there's different elements that you need to sort of show within the R4I. There's actually quite a lot of guidance on the UKRI website as well as a whole section on sort of how to sort of write these R4RIs and sort of hints and tips and things like that. And I would definitely sort of advise people to have a good look at those and to, because I know for a lot of you, it might be the first time you're having to write this sort of statement.
Yeah, I think just one final thing to add to that is, I think I would say don't use this as an opportunity to go, oh, well, I've got 30 publications to my name, so I'm just going to stick them all in the R4RI and take up all the word count with that, because that's not actually going to be very helpful for the panelists. They, you might only have, say, 3 publications that you're on, but it's actually your opportunity to say, this is what I did as part of this paper, and that demonstrates how I have the skills in order to deliver this piece of work, right? So take the opportunity really to explain to the panelists, not just I'm on a paper, but this is how this, you know, demonstrates my skills and ability.
Thanks, everyone. Next question is a two-part question. Number one, is a collaborator, i.e. for intellectual input, entered as a project partner and listed in the core team 2? And then number two, is the Gantt chart covered in the diagrammatic work plan, or is this also an allowed extra page?
Thanks, Zoe. I think I can do both, so I'll start. So as we've sort of talked about a little bit already, collaborators are potentially listed as project partners, but potentially not as well. They could be just generally mentioned in the vision and approach. So you may list collaborators as project partners, but they are not listed within the core team, regardless of the type of collaborator they are. You would not see those in the core team section of the application. And the second part was, can you remind me? The documents, the vision, the project plans, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So we want one project plan within your application. So it's sometimes referred to as a Gantt chart, sometimes as a diagrammatic project plan, but they are the same thing. You just provide one visual representation of your project plans, that could be in a Gantt chart form or any other kind of project plan format that you prefer or will be most suitable to explain how your project is likely to pan out and how you will manage it.
Thank you, Sarah. So next question, again being upvoted. For the pre-doctoral fellowship, how does one demonstrate ownership of your project if you are part of a large research group with multiple related but distinct projects ongoing?
That's a good question. And again, that's probably going to be kind of specific to your personal circumstances in your project. I mean, I think in general, and I think this is what we'd like to see for all of these is, you know, you'll need to kind of write this in such a way that you talk about, you know, maybe how this piece of research fits into the broader scope of what's being done in that particular group. But you need to kind of talk about what specifically you are going to be doing, how that is in its own particular niche. You know, you can't just be kind of you know, it needs to be something that's sort of unique to you. Ideally, if you're making this application, right, you'll be able to sort of say, particularly, you know, if you're an allied health professional or a clinician or what have you, you'll sort of be able to link the work that you'd like to do with your previous, you know, clinical experience, for example, and sort of show how, you know, this is not just someone has a PhD project that they want someone to do and they're just slotting you in as a pair of hands, right? You kind of need to show how it's relevant to you, it's relevant to your experience, it's relevant to your interests, and it's relevant to your career development. That's kind of the sort of key way I think that you can sort of show a degree of ownership. You know, we don't expect you to have, you know, come up with an entire proposal independently of any other scientific expert, right? But you need to sort of show that you are part of that piece of work and you are certainly one of the driving forces behind it, and that it's relevant to your experience and your career going forward.
Thank you, Charles. Next question, again being upvoted. For the Clinician Fellowship, do clinicians have to be registered in the UK or whichever country they are based at?
So it would have to, well, so you have to be registered with a organisation. You have to have a host organisation that's eligible to hold UKRI funding. These are typically UK HEI, so you would need to be either registered or have a clear plan of how you are going to be registered with a UK regulatory body in most cases. Again, it's difficult to sort of get into sort of individual specifics of everything. So if you are an international applicant and you are looking to apply for one of the clinical schemes, and you do not hold that registration, it's definitely best to get in touch with us directly at the Fellows inbox to discuss that further.
Thank you, Sam. How many CDA awardees have additional team members, e.g. a technician? Do applicants commonly include this or tend to just apply for themselves only?
So I don't think I could give you a number off the top of my head as to how many do this. What I can say is it's certainly a common thing that people do apply for, you know, a technician or maybe a postdoc. It's not expected. So you can apply, and you know, depends on what you're doing, but you can apply and say, I don't need, you know, extra funding for a member of staff, for example. That is possible. You can also justify, yes, I need a member of staff or two. I think with all these things, it's this sort of sounds like a cop-out answer, but what you really need to do is sort of say, this is the research that I'd like to do in my fellowship. It has to be a piece of research that is appropriate size for a fellowship. And then you need to basically say, if that's the kind of resource that you need in order to deliver that fellowship, then you can ask for it, right? So as I say, it may be that you think, actually, I don't need any additional members of staff for this fellowship. And if you can make that case, that's fine. If you can make the case for, I need a postdoc and a technician, that's also fine. Just one thing to remember is, don't go crazy and think, oh, fantastic, I can ask for 3 postdocs and 2 technicians and someone else. Because again, the idea of the CDA is that this is your first step to being an independent researcher. And the panel are probably not going to be convinced if you say, I'm going to go from having never supervised a group of people before to supervising a group of 10 people on my fellowship. That's probably not going to be very competitive. So I think if you can justify the resource in terms of the numbers of additional staff, and it's at an appropriate size for that first step to independence, then that's in the right kind of area. But again, it'll be very specific to the research that you want to do as part of your fellowship.
Yeah, so just to come in a little bit more on that, in terms, you have to remember the CDA and the Clinician Scientist Fellowship, both of them are there to basically build you to the point of being an independent investigator. And obviously becoming an independent investigator, part of that is building your own research team. So you need to consider that in terms of staffing. And also don't think I'm not going to include staff on there because it will make my application too expensive. It's not to do about the expense of the application, it's to do with the value for money. So if you need a technician to deliver the work to make sure that what you're proposing is feasible within the time frame of a fellowship, you know, cost them in and link into the packages of work that they would be delivering. So we often hear from people like, I've not included staff members in an application because I thought it would be really too expensive and the panel wouldn't fund it. It's not to do with expense, to do with added value, because then you may get feedback that says, oh yes, they want to do 5 years worth of work, but they can do it all by themselves and do all this training and this, that and the other, and it's just not deliverable and not feasible within that time frame. So it's just a really tricky balance. We know it's quite difficult to get right.
Can I also add in, I mean, that sort of very much links into the total cost and of the application itself. So again, you know, it's about the value for money rather than the actual cost of doing the research. Well, equally, you know, we don't want to pay more than is required for the research, but equally we wouldn't want to underfund research if it can't be delivered within that amount. So you need to apply for what's, you know, appropriate, and it has to be fully justified for what you're asking for. So, you know, some types of research are much more expensive or costly than others, but overall it's the value for money that we're asking for, looking to judge against.
Thank you, everyone. The next question is project partners / international collaborators. I don't understand why we can only list them as £1. Can they be costed as COIs or RAs?
So the project partner is not expected to, is supposed to be contributing something to the project rather than requesting funding. I think there are some exceptions to that in terms of like travel for the project partner, but I'll let Sarah answer that bit. You cannot have co-investigators or co-leads on a fellowship application. A fellowship application is a personal award. You are the project lead and you alone. And then what was the other bit of that, Zoe?
The term RA was used, which do you mean?
Yes. Can we list them as COIs or RAs?
Well, RA would normally be the type of research assistant, on more of your staff member on your fellowship. So again, that would be someone you would recruit to support you on your fellowship, not someone you would be collaborating with as either a project partner or as a more general collaborator. So from both my and Sam answers, we certainly co-investigator and RA are not appropriate roles for including anyone who's collaborating with you. look first to the project partner role. You can include any value of contribution there. It is certainly not necessary. You can add £1 if it's a nominal contribution, but if it's going to be a much more significant contribution, then absolutely state, you know, any value of contribution that this project partner can potentially be bringing to your project.
Thank you. The next question has been upvoted. Can I request funding for a research assistant to be hired by the project partner's institution? And if yes, must this overlap with my time spent at the project partner?
I think for that one, I would probably need a little bit more information about what that research assistant would be doing at this project partners institution. And I'd also be wanting, you know, these staff members are supposed to be your staff members. How are you going to be supervising them and involved in the delivery of research if they're not sort of located close to you? So I think, again, with that one, it's quite sort of an individual circumstance. Best to probably just get in touch with us so we can sort of delve a bit more into that a bit more deeply.
Thank you, Sam. Next question, can your PhD supervisor be your host institution mentor?
So you mean, you know, your mentor is there to provide sort of independent career advice. They should be distinct from your sponsor. Again, from sort of anecdotally sitting in lots of funding meetings, when someone puts down their mentor and it's the same name as the sponsor, the panel will ask you how you're actually going to get that independent career advice, because your sponsor is there to provide that scientific guidance and mentor is there to provide that career advice. But we don't stipulate who that mentor has to be. It just needs to be someone appropriate. At the end of the day, a mentor is sort of very personal to you, incredibly important in supporting you throughout your career. They may change as well during your career. You know, sometimes a mentor is appropriate at certain career stages, a different mentor might be appropriate at others. You may actually have, you know, you're not going to necessarily write it down on our forms, but you may need 2 different types of mentor. So for some clinical academics, I know some will have a clinically focused mentor and some will have an academic mentor to bring in those different views. So I think mainly it's just think very carefully about who is best to be your mentor. It's not just sort of a tick box exercise of putting a name down on a form for us. You know, this is to do with your sort of research career and who's best to support you.
Thank you, Sam. The next question, is there an expected upper limit for CDA funding or maximum staffing limit?
I mean, no. So formally, we don't have an expected upper limit, right? So as we've said before, and as it says in the guidance as well, you know, you need to request the resources that are appropriate for you to be able to do that piece of work, right? That's appropriate to a 5-year fellowship. As I kind of indicated before, right, in terms of the staffing level, you know, I think the panel would take a dim view of someone who is, as I say, making that first step towards independence, asking for, you know, 4 or 5 postdocs and 3 technicians and this and that, right? That would be, I think they would say, unrealistic and probably also not represent good value for money. So you should consider what the value for money is. I could kind of give an indication to the typical range of costs of CDA awards, but actually, again, it's, you know, you shouldn't be looking at these as targets. You know, you should just be requesting the resources that you need in order to deliver the work that you're proposing. And I would say, you know, university research offices have tools to help you work out how much this kind of research costs, right? So if you've designed a package of work that is a fellowship size package of work, you can go to the research office and they can help you work out, okay, well, this is how much it's going to cost. And you can kind of start from that position. But I don't think you should be thinking, for example, oh, they'll fund up to 3 million quid, so I'll definitely make sure I ask for the 3 million quid or what have you. It's going to be kind of specific to the program of work that you want to do.
Okay, thank you, Charles. The next question, does the career progression should have 1 page, including a Gantt chart, or the Gantt chart and timeline have 1 page, and the career progression should be mentioned within the 6-page part? the description changed from the pre-announcement? Just a little bit of clarification there, please.
The first thing to say is please follow the guidance in the full announcement. We were working across UKRI and on some fellowship questions, and so that's why a new section on career progression is within the full opportunities that have been published. So you have an opportunity to write about your career progression plans in response to that specific question, which has a word count, I think, of 700 words. You've also talked about 6 pages, which I interpret to be the vision and approach document. You do not need to talk about career progression there, as you have a separate question to answer that. Vision and approach should be about your research plans in the main. In addition to the 6 pages of that document, you can include a project plan as an additional page, which may be a Gantt chart, but does not have to be a Gantt chart. It can be any type of visual project plan that you want to provide for your fellowship. So I hope I've covered all the aspects there in that answer.
Thank you, Sarah. We are at 3:59, so it might be the final question now. For the CDA, can you clarify if you are allowed to apply as a new assistant professor? You don't have to be on a proleptic appointment at the time of application, but need to transfer to a proleptic appointment if awarded the fellowship.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so for a CDA award, you can, for example, you can, for example, have been appointed to, say, a lecturer position at an institution. So you have your kind of first independent academic position, at least, and you can still apply for the fellowship. As it says, once you are awarded the fellowship, if you're awarded the fellowship, we would expect you to spend 100% of your time on that fellowship. So, you know, teaching and admin responsibilities that otherwise come with your sort of academic position, you cannot do those, right? So what that would mean for your institution is they would put you onto a proleptic appointment, where essentially once the fellowship is over, you kind of go back to being in your kind of independent academic position, or your tenure track academic position, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so you can apply, but as it says, if you are awarded the money, you must spend 100% of your time on the fellowship.
Yeah, so just to add on that, if you know, in terms of what we're looking for, we have this skills and experience webpage on our website, which basically tells you what we're looking for from applicants to that scheme. So obviously, if you are, you know, and you also have to, you've also got to make a clear case as to why you require a fellowship. So if you are already on a permanent contract, if you've already got, you know, lots of research grant money coming in and things like that, if you're already at a stage of independence, you know, it's going to be difficult for the panel to see why you actually need a fellowship. So it's very important. You have to remember, a fellowship is about getting you to the next step in your career. It is not a research grant, it's not a project grant, it's not just funding the research, it's funding you and that work, and it's a vehicle to transition you to the next step in your academic career.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to Zoe for asking the questions, and thank you to all of the panel for answering all of those many questions. We will create a question and answer document, which we will provide to anybody who is registered to attend, and it will also be available online shortly. Or any of the questions that were not answered in the live will be on there, as well as questions that were answered live and in the chat as well. So it's all to say is just to say thank you ever so much for attending the webinar today, and we hope that you all enjoyed it. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.